This right here is the raw file of a busy street picture taken in Morocco. But it is unedited so far, so I'm gonna show you how you can end up with a picture that looks something like this at the end. For this edit, I'm gonna use a program called Adobe Lightroom, but pretty much no matter what software you're gonna be using, you should be able to get a very similar effect to the picture, even though the sliders and tools might be named a little bit differently. And the first thing I'm gonna do to this picture is raise the shadow slider. Now, as you can see, it just brings up all of this darkness in the picture and it reveals all of this detail. Now, I really think bringing up the shadows in a scene like this is very, very important because there are people, there are bags, there are just so many things in this photo that I really want to show off and really want the people to actually see. So bringing up the shadows can really work in that regard. Now, an additional step that you can take is also bring up the blacks right here in Lightroom and even bring down the contrast. Now, especially with contrast, a lot of people will bring that to the right, but even though it does make everything more contrasty, I do think it loses some of this subtlety and it does ruin some of this shadow detail, or rather take it away. So I actually prefer to, a lot of the times, go a little bit into the minus or negative contrast. So for now, I think that's a pretty good look. Yes, it's a little bit washed out even, but I really like it for starting off. So after having that, I'm gonna play around with the highlights. And as you can see, the sky is rather bright, so I want to bring that down a bit. And even though there aren't any clouds, unfortunately, I can still do the best that I can. Maybe I'll bring up the whites a little bit though to give some additional dynamic to the picture, and I think that should do the basics pretty well. Quickly, before I go into the cropping tool, I actually want to go into the vibrance and saturation. So bringing up the saturation will affect every color in the picture and just make everything more saturated. Whereas the vibrance tool will just bring up the colors that aren't as prominent, aren't as strong, and therefore it really helps to emphasize the entire color in a natural way. I might actually mix that with a little bit saturation still, but I don't want to go overboard here. Especially if you're working with a raw file though, it can work to bring up the vibrance or saturation. So now I'm actually gonna straighten the picture, and I'm gonna do that in a very subtle way because I don't want everything to be super straight. It's almost impossible to do that, but rather just get in a vicinity of what looks pretty straight at the end, and then just kind of check how far I can go, so this is not too bad, and even go down into the transform tool to just check out the different modes, and this can really help sometimes to straighten all of the lines. Especially in architecture, it might be worth to play around with this. And honestly, I think auto does a pretty good job compared to off here. So after that, I'm real quick gonna remove the chromatic aberration. This is all of the purple and green fringing on the high contrast edges. As you can see here, there's quite a lot of green lines, and just by clicking that, it removes it. Also want to enable the profile corrections to also remove the lens vignetting, as well as the lens distortion. So, after all of this technical stuff, let's go back into the editing, and furthermore go into the tonal curve. Now what you can do here is really fine-tune every area of brightness in your picture. So what I'm gonna do is even bring up the highlights a little bit. This might seem a little bit counterintuitive, but it actually helps to get a lot of dynamic in your picture. And then just gonna play around with the rest of these sliders. I really want to make this picture pop and make it alive, but at the same time, I don't want to wash it out. You know, by bringing up the darks, bringing up the shadows, it's just very washed out. So I want to make sure that I still have all of these details, but still have at least some sort of different contrast in it. A great thing that you can do is kind of go into the minus darks here and then actually bring up the shadows just slightly. By bringing up the shadows in the tonal curve, you will make the very dark parts just that little bit brighter. So this really helps if you have some very dark, jackets, hair, or back there it's very dark. It can really help to just not crush them and add this subtlety back into the picture. Now after these very few adjustments, I just want to quickly show you from before to after already. So here to the left it's very dark, very contrasty, and to the right you just see much more detail everywhere, and it's also much brighter, more inviting, more vibrant, which is really something that I absolutely love here in this very, very busy scene. So furthermore, I think I'm just gonna fine-tune some of the color here, and I'm gonna do that by going to the color temperature. Now you might have noticed it is almost a bit too warm, so I'm gonna bring down the color temperature here to something a little bit more bluish. That should look pretty good. And then maybe even go into the clarity real quick and see what I want to do here. Now clarity is actually a very fine contrast, and as long as you don't overdo it, it can really help to bring out all of the textures and again all of the items. Now after fine-tuning some of that, I really think I need to go back to the cropping tool, because as you can see, all of the people, all of the life, everything going on is more towards the bottom of the picture and pretty much below this line right here. So what I want to do is crop down some of that sky and actually just get rid of the rest, so just kind of make a panoramic aspect ratio. And the thing is, you might think, well, everything is going on below here, so just crop it like that. But if you can see that, it's just too cluttered now. It loses its sense of space. So I kind of want to bring that down, definitely get rid of some of that sky, but at least still have some of that aerial view, know that there's something above, there's the sky. It really gives you breathing room, whereas if you were crop it very tight, it might just be overload of everything, and it doesn't really work that well. So it's just gonna be like this. Perhaps I'm even gonna crop some of that bottom to really get a nice panorama actually. And yeah, look at that. We now have the entire picture filled with stuff going on, with life, with people, but we still have at least some of that aerial feel and view. Now furthermore, I think I'm just gonna skip all of the other global adjustments, because even though you could certainly adjust sharpening and all of that stuff, it is more kind of the boring and technical side rather than the creative and artistic thing that you can do to your picture. So instead, I'm gonna go right away into the local adjustments and go into the graduated filters. Now the graduated filters are great to adjust a very large part of your photo. So for example, I've just added one right here, and I want to go a little bit into the minus exposure. Now this you can use for all sorts of different techniques. It's really awesome. Now for this first filter, I just want the very bottom to be a bit darker to close out the picture, get even more attention towards the center, and I'm actually going to do the exact same thing with the top. Also add a rather small graduated filter here and go a bit into the minus exposure. As always, you don't want to do something like this. You always want to keep it at least somewhat looking natural. So after that, I might even add some of the sides. So here it's really going to be very, very little vignetting, and towards the left it might be a bit more than the right, but still nothing crazy. And I just want to show you real quick from before any of these graduated filters to after. It looks already much more interesting, it gives depth, and it helps to draw your viewer's eye within the picture. So again, here's from before, here's after so far, but I'm even gonna add another filter. I'm gonna go a little bit more advanced here. So I'm gonna add a very big one with a very soft gradient. The gradient is, by the way, the amount of softness you have from the filter towards the rest of the picture. So kind of how soft the edge is. And you want to make this very, very soft, especially in this case, because I want to make the entire top part a little bit brighter and even mix that with some whites. So this is to add additional dynamic and additional complexity to the picture and even enhance the lighting that is already there. So now I'm gonna add another one, a very big one, over the parallel on the other side of the photo, and this time go a bit into the minus exposure. Now the thing that you can do is actually go into the minus exposure, but bring up the shadow slightly, so you make everything a bit darker, but you don't crush any of the dark parts. Now, before any of the graduated filters, as of right now, it is not only the corners being darker in various different ways, but also now having the top being much brighter than the bottom. And this is not something that you might even notice if you don't know that you've done it. It's just something that really helps to add complexity, to add interest, and also to make the entire picture seem more natural. So the gradient filters are great for that, great for very large adjustments, and again showing you from before any adjustments towards the left right here, to the right is after the adjustment so far of course, but it's much more vibrant. But now we're really getting into the complexity of the lighting as well, and we're gonna be able to adjust that even further with the radial filters. The radial filters are actually very similar to the graduated filters, but instead of adding a side to the picture with plus, minus exposure, or whatever you would like to add in it, here you can actually add a radial filter, as the name already says. And by inverting the mask, you can just add minus, plus exposure, perhaps even local contrast, local clarity. And this is really great because you can do it in a very small way. You can add a filter here with this amount of exposure. You can add another filter over there with that amount of exposure and contrast. You can really complexify your entire picture by so much. So what I'm gonna do right now is first of all, just gonna worry about the exposure. So I'm gonna add a filter right here, a rather big one, and go a little bit into the plus exposure, mix that with some whites again, and now what I wanna do, this is very important, so I'm just gonna disable that for a second, but you wanna look at your picture, look at what is bright, what is, you know, for example, this guy's jacket, but what could even be more bright, more attention grabbing, because if you add plus exposure, you will always draw more attention to that part that is bright. For example, right here, what are you looking at? Probably at the guy, maybe at the shirt dude on the top right here, but you probably aren't really looking at this dark dress or, you know, the shadows in the back there. So for me right now, it's all about finding these interesting spots and actually making them even more interesting and bright. So for that, I'm just gonna add a filter right here, and I'm actually gonna delete that one real quick. But I wanna start off with this guy with the yellow jacket with the car here. It is a very, you know, substantial part of the picture, I think, and I do wanna enhance that a bit. Again, plus exposure, some plus whites, and maybe even a little bit of contrast, but not much. And that's all I'm gonna do for this guy right here. So you can see from before, after, you might think it is negligible, it's nothing big. And you're right, it's nothing big. But by adding multiple filters, either by going on the new right here and adding a completely new filter, or what I like to do, go over the previous filter, right click and duplicate it, I can just drag it over various parts of the photo, and again duplicating it, just kind of seeing what is more interesting, what do I want to enhance again. And the great thing about this is that you can use multiple layers. So you can duplicate it, make the right part of these purses a little bit brighter than the left, and with that you have more attention on the purses themselves, but you also have differentiation from the left of the purses to the right. So again, I might want to go over this guy's face right now, and not over the entire jacket, because I think the jacket is already bright enough, but this time just make the face a little bit brighter. And you might really, you know, if you've never used dodge and burning before, you might say, well, again, okay, I see it does a little bit more than just one filter if you use it in combination, but is it really that big of a deal? So let me show you that. I'm just gonna do all of my dodge and burning, and then afterwards I'm gonna show you the before and after, and believe me, you're gonna be very, very surprised. So this is all about very subtle adjustments, because sometimes you might just have a single face in the background, for example of these kids right here, that aren't a very big part of the picture, you know, they're not as important, as essential as for example this guy in the foreground right here, but you can still use them as an additional interest giver for the people that look closely at the photo, if that makes any sense. But pretty much you want to use plus exposure and interest and the radial filters over various different subjects, various different places, and use them in different strengths. For example, towards the left, it's relatively, you know, it's very even, so I just want to get some unevenness and add some plus exposure, maybe not even to add additional interest, but mainly even to just add difference and complexity, and it does add interest that way, even if you don't want to kind of add a spotlight on a certain area. Okay, I realize this might be a little bit confusing, and I don't even know if what I'm saying makes sense, but I hope you at least get the point. I really would recommend you to play around with dodge and burning and with the radial filters yourself. Take a picture, street photo, landscape, it doesn't really matter, and just play around with it, see if something works, if something doesn't work. And the plus exposure is usually the most important one. So that's why I'm already gonna show you real quick from before any plus exposure to after. Now again, this might not seem like, oh okay, you didn't change up the entire picture, but it does change the very subtle and small detail parts by a lot. Look at from before to after, it is just more bright, more inviting on the parts that I want to be emphasized. It's really, you know, it might get boring by now, but believe me, dodge and burning is a huge part to refining your picture and to really get the most out of it. I'm real quick gonna add some minus exposure over just some areas as well. Minus exposure is great to add some differentiation between very bright parts. So if you have a lot of brights in your picture, then you might want to divide some of them with darks. That way the brights don't become overabundant, I believe is the word. But yeah, again, dodge and burning is really kind of a science for itself. I've made a video about just dodge and burning, which is like 45 minutes long in case you're interested. But yeah, I'm gonna do it very quickly so you don't have to wait too long. So here's from before any dodge and burning now, plus and minus exposure, and here is afterwards. I don't know about you, but I much prefer the picture afterwards. So with that being said, what I'm gonna do real quick right here is just add some more radial filters, actually just like 4 or 5, and one is gonna be with plus clarity and some plus contrast. Because you cannot only make stuff more interesting or less interesting with exposure, you can also do that with clarity and contrast. So for example, by adding a lot of contrast, a lot of clarity over certain parts, you really make them very crisp, very punchy, whereas you might want to add another filter with the exact opposite. and actually go a bit into the minus clarity and minus contrast here, especially for distant objects. You might want to consider doing that, and that way you can really fine-tune everything so much more beyond just exposure. But at the same time, I do think I'm gonna wrap it up relatively soon, so I'm just gonna add the very last plus exposure filter over this guy's face way to the left, and with it, I'm gonna say that I'm done. So if we look at the history here from before any adjustments, here is the picture at the start, just a raw file. It isn't a bad picture, I actually really like the raw file, but afterwards I really think I've made the most of it, and especially more than anything else, I love showing off all of this detail, all of these things, and all of the busyness of this entire photo by raising the shadows and really showing everything. So what do you think about this picture? Do you like it? Do you think you would have added another adjustment that I didn't here? Would you have not added another adjustment that I did add here? Let me know down in the comments below. I'm very interested and eager to learn about this. I think it's very interesting to hear your guys' opinions. Also, I've gotten a lot of critique for speaking very fast without a lot of spaces in between the sentences. So let me know if you think this was better, or if you prefer my regular way of speaking. So hopefully you've enjoyed this video, and if you did so and found it helpful, please consider donating a few dollars to your favorite charity. Thank you very much.